Today I want to show you this, and it's a really interesting discussion, and it hopefully will give you some scope as it relates to how truly special you are while you're human. How truly special you are while you are human.
Hello, everybody. You have just tuned into Cyberhuman Frontiers. It's November 21st, 2020, and we have been discussing and delving into the idea of quantum phenomena and how they probably have something to do with the experiences that we have in our lives every day. There is incontrovertible evidence that quantum action exists in the world of in the world of the small, the world of the very small. When we get below the size of molecules and particles, and we get down to the level of energy and vibration, and if you combine the idea of energy and vibration from the world of physics with the concept that many people are familiar with regarding energy and vibration with the reality that we experience or the way that we feel, then it's not a stretch to combine together what we know as facts from physics with some of the things that we experience in our lives that we have been, I don't know, we've all experienced, we've all experienced free choice, doubt, quandary, the unexpected, and expectation, and then the occasional really just, absolutely realistic dream that we might have had, which then might have had some ties to something that we experienced in our daily life, in our daily world. The occasional spontaneous idea, just the idea of creativity. Where does a brand new idea come from? Oh, I see something that I think I got to mute. Where does a brand new idea come from? Did things just come out of nothing? In my opinion, not likely. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go a little bit further into, we're going to do a little bit of a review of what quantum phenomena or entanglement and what some physicists have so fondly called spooky action at a distance. Spooky. It's not so spooky. It's just kind of not, you don't just intuitively understand what it is, but the examples are there. And we can give some really simple ones. So that's by way of review of the previous show. Couple of examples, one of which that we featured in last episode was the unfortunate experience of one cat versus another one in something called Schrodinger's experiment. And of course, it might have depended on whether you were observing the cat, whether you were watching what might have happened to the cat. And of course, you've got to be careful because the cat might have been watching you. Cats do that. So there was that example, but there are for animal lovers, there are also far less emotionally charged examples than that one that we can go into, and we'll go into one of those. A little quick review of the simple mechanism of quantum entanglement, just so that we're all kind of up to speed. Folks, this seems complicated, and at the level of the mathematics that the physicists get into, it really is complicated. I'm not a genius mathematician, but there is also a more generalistic way to look at it, and you don't lose the basic meaning of what quantum phenomena are. And what we're going to want to do is tie that into our, real life experiences. There are some who do not choose to relate the quantum phenomena of physics to things that might occur in our daily lives. And some of those peoples, and scholars, everyone's entitled to their own belief, and they have their own thoughts and postulates and theories to back it up with. But some would maintain that everything in our lives is either predetermined, pre-programmed, or strictly only the result of measurable chemical interactions that occur in our brains and in our bodies, and that it is a completely tangible, concrete world, and that there is no greater depth beyond that. And again, we might suggest if you're just joining us now, you might want to review the last episode, even the last couple of episodes, where we sort of slowly, we took a deeper cut into this as we've gone. So we don't want to leave anybody behind. And a whole lot of people do research in this area, and there's a whole lot of money behind it, and institutional money. Research laboratories are working on this. Even the computer industry is even utilizing aspects of quantum phenomena to develop the next generation of computers. And none of these people would be doing this and have been doing it for a good long time if there wasn't something to it. But most interestingly, what we really want to do tonight is to try to begin to relate that to some of the things that we can show you proof of some of these types of, at least suggesting anyway, some of these types of phenomena that could have every likelihood of occurring in our human bodies. And that we just might be intelligent life forms that are far greater than what we're used to seeing when we look at ourselves or our friends, relatives, and family. It might be a whole lot more to it than that. And the experiences that people have written about for decades and centuries, some of the sense that they have of spirituality, or the sense that they have of premonition of the future, or a very vivid recounting of something that might have been either in the future or the past, that they might have had no way of really knowing from a tangible experience, yet they knew it. They had a knowing. So it suggests a whole lot of things. There could be a timeless aspect to us. There could be some way to relate this to a higher level of spirituality. And it would be, if those things are all true, then communication with other life forms in the galaxy or in other galaxies that'd not be a stretch at all. They might be able to communicate with us as well. Lastly, in this, as by way of introduction, I guess I would just say, we've seen, at least if you're a science fiction reader like I am, science fiction of years ago, 30 years ago, some of it has come true today, and it will likely do so again. Really wild stuff. These are great areas to ponder. It just might turn into something that you find helps you to explain things that you just said, wow, why does that happen? And so we start with the simple and we go into the deeper. And so, TMC, how are you tonight, my good friend?
I'm doing good, Andy. Doing good.
Good. Me too. Been busy, but good. So, quick little review before we get a little deeper into it. I'm going to put up something that we had played, a little bit of a video, and it was last week, and we did more on that, but this is just the quick review. Let me get this thing going here. See, I think it's ready. Yep, that's sort of ready. Now I get that weird echo. Whenever I share a screen, I get this weird echo. And so I'm going to try not to talk while I'm playing this video. All right. What we're seeing here is something from Fermilab. Okay, and this is a simple version of quantum entanglement, what it is. And the things to pay attention to, because I probably won't want to talk too much during it, is the idea that one particle, when it decays into two others, two daughter particles, those daughter particles share a relation that transcends the boundaries of time and space, which is huge. It could be any distance. And as far as measuring the relation between those two particles, it is literally, from all equipment and instrumentation that we have, it is instantaneous. In other words, it's not at the speed of an electron or the speed of light. It is way faster if it's not instantaneous. We don't even know if it's instantaneous because our instrumentation isn't that good to be able to know for certain if it is instant or if it's just a really, really, really tiny slice of time. So, simple example from Fermilab. And this is, I'll probably let it run. We do operate here in the process of our this form of investigative scientific journalism that we do in a nonprofit manner, and it's for the purpose of sharing information to help empower all of us with more knowledge, more understanding, more ways of dealing with what can sometimes seem to be a very perplexing world. Here we go.
Probabilities with all combinations of up and down. However, it's possible to pair two subatomic particles so they both are described by a single wave function. That's what we mean by entangled. Two particles and a single wave function. You do this by taking a parent particle, which in our example has 0 spin, and let it decay into two particles. Spin is a conserved quantity, which means that it can never change. So if the parent particle has 0 spin, then the two daughter particles have to have opposite spin. If one has a spin pointing left, the other is right. If one is up, the other is down, and so on. When you add the two, you get the 0 that you started with. So that's the simplest example of a pair of entangled particles, which is to say two particles with opposite spin and a single wave function that governs both of them. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. The entanglement doesn't depend on the two particles being close to one another. As long as the two particles don't interact with anything, you can separate them by feet, miles, or even huge distances, and the two particles are connected by a single wave function, and the two particles will have opposite spin. Now, remember that one of the key facets of quantum mechanics is that the quantum world is intrinsically probabilistic. We can't know, even in principle, the outcome of a measurement before we make it. So, suppose we select one of the two particles and pick a direction to measure the spin. Say we pick horizontal. The measured spin will be either right or left, each 50% of the time. We could have selected the other particle to do the measurement with the same result, 50% right and 50% left. The real weirdness arises when we measure the spin direction of both of the entangled particles. Say we measure the horizontal spin direction of this particle over here on the left, and the measurement says it's to the right. Then we know that the outcome of the other measurement, it will be 100% of the time left, 100% of the time.
Indigo, are you there?
Oh, wow. I was muted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I didn't know I was muted. I said, thanks. I said, I'm going to stop it right here because what we want to hang on in order to go through this thought exploration that we're going to do tonight is that think of not just these types of particles that were referred to here, but think of other particles, perhaps biological molecules, perhaps biological particles which a parent particle gives rise by way of decay into two other particles, two daughter biomolecules, if you or bio components, whatever they might be. And while it's mind-boggling to think that the distance could be huge, what if the distance between those particles those two daughter particles was, in one part of one's brain and one was in another part of the brain. What if those particles are related, and they are related in an instantaneous communication manner, and it didn't require for there to be a relationship between those two? It didn't require there to be an actual neuron, a brain neuron structure between the two of them, connecting them together, because if they came from the same parent, they are, in the quantum reference, they are entangled. In other words, they are forever related to each other, those two. So that's kind of fast forwarding to where we're trying to go in this discussion tonight. Next, what I would suggest is that we look at what that might portend in terms of how thoughts or memories or a brain function in one part of the mind might be connected to one other totally unrelated place, and that it doesn't even stop there. It could be related to another dimension of communication that might be outside the person. It just might be that we think that we're limited to this three-dimensional world, but maybe we're not. Maybe we're not. If we aren't, that would do a whole lot to explain some of the experiences that people have when they have extrasensory perception type experiences, when they see a future that hasn't happened yet, when they have a vision of something that they never were anywhere near. And that's kind of where we're going with this. So this is at the root of the physics of it. Now, one last example, without getting into that example about Schrodinger's cat. Here's what we can know about two entangled objects, larger objects, two gloves. Got two gloves, one of them is in one box, one glove is in another box. And we don't know about what's in either of those boxes. We don't know whether it's the left-hand glove or the right-hand glove. All we have is knowledge that those two gloves are related somehow, and we know that one of them is going to be right and one of them is going to be left. So this parallels the example that this man from Fermilab gave very closely. As soon as we look in one of the boxes and see that it's the right-handed glove, then we automatically know, since we know that those two came from the same parent, which is the idea of left and right gloves, we automatically know that the other glove that we have not looked at yet in the box is the other hand. So that's very, very simple way of looking at it. But you can expand on this without violating the logic of it. And that's kind of where we're going to kind of a little bit of speculation here. But we're also going to be able to ground this in certain research that's been done and certain studies with results, quantifiable results, and something that TMC will put up. We'll go through it probably toward the end of the discussion. Now, I'm going to move on to another one, and this is going to be fun. Yeah, well, this is, I'll throw this one up real quickly. This man gives another kind of a simple, and I need simple, I'm not some, calculus mathematics genius. I need simple. And if anybody else is like me, then I guess you'll simple. So here we go. Just a couple minutes with this man.
The idea that this bizarre branch of physics could be useful for understanding the human brain might seem like a stretch, but the reason it's useful is because quantum mechanics is all about statistics. For instance, it's impossible to know where an electron is at any given time. You can only know how likely it is that when you measure it, you will find it at a given place. And that's not because we're bad at measuring. That's just how the universe works on a
Okay, so right there. Kind of get back to what is the kind of the byline for tonight's discussion, which is we've all experienced pondering through a number of thoughts, and there's a not knowing, and we only know it once we know it. And up until that point, maybe myriad possibilities are open. We experience this. We live with the idea of free choice, and we do make choices, and we have expectations. Sometimes the expectation is fulfilled, but sometimes something just pops in from somewhere. We don't know where it came from. Life does this, right? We know there are the unpredictable aspects of the lives that we live. Where do the unexpected things come from? Did they just not exist at all? Did they pop out of nowhere? By the law of conservation of energy, and if we consider thought or the energy of thoughts and ideas, energy is conserved. It is conserved in such a way that it didn't just come from no place. It had to move from one place to another in some form. So let's see what else he has to say briefly here anyway.
Fundamental level. Statistics are also useful in other branches of science, though, for different reasons. They can help us understand the big picture even when we don't know all of the lower level details. Like, you can use statistics to predict how a group of people will vote even if you don't know what every individual person will do. And when it comes to the brain, there are a bunch of low level details that we don't understand. For example, while neuroscientists have figured out where our short-term and long-term memories are stored, it's still not clear how your brain selects certain details to remember and others to forget. But
okay, am I muted? No. Think about that for a second. Let that sink in. These ideas could come from another source, another location. There isn't anything that is tying the point of origin of our thoughts. And by the way, Tigger, you're right on. Big hellos to everybody out in the chat too, by the way. These ideas, these thoughts, and the which one is it going to be, could come from somewhere else. They could come from another individual. Have you ever experienced either a resonance or a dissonance with another person? It might not have even required words to be spoken. It might not have required very much of anything from the tangible physical world of what our senses would tell us. Have you ever experienced just a kind of a knowing or a feeling? So I not only would I not rule out what you're saying, Tigger, but I would tend to agree with it. And we don't know discreetly how this happens, but we certainly have a whole lot of things at submicroscopic atomic physics and quantum entanglement that suggest that it could be the mechanism by way it happens. And again, there's more research. We'll actually show you some stuff in a while. Yeah, I was intrigued by what he said. I think we'll give him another few seconds, see what we'll back it up a couple seconds too.
Some cases, your short details that we don't understand. For example, while neuroscientists have figured out where our short-term and long-term memories are stored, it's still not clear how your brain selects certain details to remember and others to forget. But in some cases, we can use statistics to make decent predictions about how people will behave, even if we're not really sure why. Traditionally, these cognitive models have relied on classical probability, which can be pretty black or white. Like, you either have 3 aces in your poker hand or you don't. You either blew off that important project or you didn't. Or did you just kind of drag your feet until it was too late? See, human cognition is full of ambiguities, and classical probability.
There you go. Human cognition is full of ambiguities. Sometimes we know. For example, by way of the glove experiment, or the glove example, we know. Take 2 gloves, you know that they were a pair of gloves. They're each in 2 boxes, you don't know which one is which. You look at one and you automatically know what the other one is. Sometimes we do know. Other times, well, until we look in the boxes, we don't know. But how do we know what part of our brain might be able to see into that box? It sounds like crazy stuff, but how do you explain the kinds of senses? They are, if we think of the senses as those concrete, discrete senses, sight, sound, taste, smell, etc. these are extra sensory capacities. And if we stop and just think, if we stop and just reflect on what we've experienced in our lives, you're gonna know that you've had these types of senses sometimes, and where did they come from? So that was him. TMC, any thoughts so far on any of this subject matter, where we're going with this?
No, I think it's been a good recap, and yeah, let's just keep going.
All right. So if you recall, a number of episodes ago, we brought up something from it was actually a good while ago now. Research was done in, I believe it was 1984, into something called the Gateway Experience.
It was 83, but yeah.
What was it, 83?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So, you know what I got to do? Let me stop that for a second, and let me unshare the sound, because then I won't get that echo. And I know the echo might sound really fun out there, but it confuses the crap out of me when I hear myself say something 2 seconds later. Okay, echo gone. So now, again, you can look back in the previous episodes and you can review this. We never went quite this far in this document yet. And that's because we needed to lay a little bit more groundwork from the real concrete world of quantum physics before we could go a little bit further with it. And this particular author of this research summary didn't particularly highlight quantum physics. So I'm going to read just a little bit of this. Concept of the universe, in which at least some physicists are now coming to accept, is identical in its essential aspects with one known to the learned elite in select civilizations and cultures of high attainment in the ancient world. The concept of the cosmic egg, for example, is well known to scholars familiar with ancient writings of Eastern religions. Nor are the theories presented in this paper at variance with the essential tenets of Judeo-Christian stream of thought either. The concept of visible reality, the created world, as being an emanation of an omnipotent and omniscient divinity. Now, this is where you jump in and add or subtract from whatever I'm saying anytime here, TMC. This is where, when we look at the omniscient divinity, I am in some sense equating that to what potentially looks like an extended level of consciousness that we have. And that's huge, because it could suggest that this is the origin from whence many religions and spiritual senses have arisen in humanity over the centuries. So I'll read on a little bit more.
Yeah, they're trying to basically scientifically quantify this idea of God, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So, any other? I'm going to lose my voice here.
Yeah. It says here, an emanation of an omnipotent and omniscient divinity who is completely unknowable in his primary state of being, applying human characteristics to this omniscient, omnipotent being. And that's where I put that together with the created world, so to speak, the visible reality. And I think they're trying to some extent, tie in religion and mysticism and the idea of a creator, what we would understand as God.
Right. Would I be overstepping the bounds of common sense if I were to say to us, maybe we are too grounded? It's good to be grounded, but maybe we're too grounded in that physical, tangible world. And what it's doing is it is not blinding us, but it's preoccupying us with all of those things that are just, that our five senses keep telling us of.
I think I got what you're saying, and I'll just respond to not really agreeing or disagreeing, but giving you my perspective. I think we innately apply human characteristics to as many things as we can because we're human, because that's what we understand, that's what we identify with, that's what we make comparisons to through the majority of our upbringing and throughout our lives. So we compare and contrast everything to some extent and try to apply human characteristics to it. And that is limiting, I think, when you start dealing with things that aren't necessarily human in nature. And it's just, I think, a way for most people to just try to understand and get some type of a granular concept of
yeah. What do you mean by granular? Give me more.
Something that's to some extent quantifiable and definable in their mind. So it's not, I mean,
because we need it, right? We need it in order to cope in this physical world, right?
It's not really a need. It's more or less a drive to try to find an understanding of your reality, of what's going on around you. Some people want to understand more. Some people don't want to understand as much. Others want to understand generally, and others want to potentially understand as specifically as possible. But it's the fundamental underpinning there is this idea of trying to understand. And in order to do that, you have to put defining characteristics on something. And the most common characteristics I think that are applied are ones that equate to being human.
All right. Well, listen, will you go for this ride with me? What if we are, and I'm just saying what if, but think of it, how it might explain. What if we are primarily spiritual beings, primarily some sort of ascendant energy beings of light or something? Put on your science fiction cap and just, fill in the blanks with that. But that when we are born into this world, we are living on this planet as three-dimensional creatures, okay? And when we are born into this, then our higher self is, I was going to say incarcerated, is incarcerated into a very, very physical, linear time, limited world. So, and every waking, walking day of our lives, we get reinforcing feedback of that from the world. Okay, I just touched the table. There it is. It's a physical table. Okay, so or whatever it might be, whatever those things are, but that it may be fooling us, and we don't really get to stop and think about how maybe we are not primarily that, but our real form is something either higher, greater, or deeper than just this physical world. Would you go so far as to think maybe that we are primarily a much more spiritual energy being rather than a physical creature on a terrestrial ball of rock and iron floating in space?
I think there's two ways to look at it, and you made the view of it being optimistic or pessimistic that's for each individual to try to understand on their own. But rather than incarcerate, I would say descend. I mean, it is to some extent an incarceration when you compare and contrast this idea of not being in a body and being able to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time, or at least maybe more flexible or dynamic than where we are now. And
into the confines of the 3D world. If we totally buy into those confines of the 3D world, then when are we ever going to stop to think about the greater expanse of human consciousness?
Well, I think that's part of the test. So when we're here, we descend out of the ether, if you will. And I'm just putting sort of large cliche ideas around what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I go with that.
So when we descend here, descend isn't really a bad thing. But we're limited by the five senses as being the primary, most intense senses. So we get to experience those five senses, I think, much more impactfully, much more intensely than those that are not descended into a human meat suit, so to speak.
Look at the intensity of the senses,
Yeah.
the input that we get from this world. I mean, light, the color, blue, green. I mean, it's serious sound, rock and roll
Food,
music.
sex, air after you haven't had it for 2 minutes, water after you haven't had it for 3 days. Yeah, senses.
It's overwhelming. I mean, that's loud. That's just shouting at us every time. As soon as you wake up in the morning, open your eyes, blam, there it is. All that sensory input coming in.
Yeah. The trade-off is, I think you don't get the opportunity to understand the other information fields, or to receive the other information fields that are around us all the time.
Drowned out.
Yeah, they're totally drowned out, which is this whole idea of, people talk about, oh, we're going to ascend to 5D and I'm looking for my higher consciousness, and, it's the new age, man, and all this shit. And it's the same thing in a roundabout way that people were trying to attain through deep meditation or through religious prayer. And there's always this searching for this extra sensory, extra information, extra connection beyond the carnal, beyond the primal, beyond the five senses. And that's the box that we're in while we're here. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm of the opinion, just my personal opinion, that while we're here, this is the purgatory. People talk about going to hell and, or being in purgatory before the decision is made between you going to heaven or hell. The next jump after you leave the meat suit, what dimension do you go to? What astral plane do you go to? And we can liken it to heaven or hell, but you can put whatever quantifying or defining terms on it as you want. But when your spirit goes away, when your consciousness is separated from your meat suit, i.e. you die, where do you go?
Well, the meat suit dies.
I think
wait a minute. Yeah,
the meat suit here.
The meat suit goes back to the earth, okay? And all those molecules are recycled. What's that about? That should show us that the meat suit is really just a descent to this world, because all that stuff, all those atoms, molecules, elements, and all that just recycles. That becomes built up into a plant and another creature and all that.
It's just a car, man. The body's just a car.
A vehicle. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's all it is. And while we're here, we're in the car, and it's difficult to get out of the car. And not all cars are created the same. Some have better engines, some have larger wheels, some are faster, some are slower, some have a more reinforced roll cage, some have a spoiler on them. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we can modify the cars now with surgery, and at this point, we're starting to be able to do all kinds of stuff with the proverbial meat suit car, the meat suit vehicle.
Right. And we've spent a good amount of time surveying all of those manners in which more and more technological capacity is coming along. It's 5G, it's gene editing, it's all that stuff. That's all very physical stuff. But that can never, at least in my opinion anyway, I don't know, folks, tell us what you think. That can never that will never get us out of just some different version of the meat suit vehicle. It may be modified. It might be half cyber. It might be a cyber human creature as well. But at the end of the day, that is a descendant form of life, not an ascendant one.
I think it depends on how it's applied. If we look at history, I agree with you. It's a form of, we're walking into a form of slavery that's going to literally be infused into our genetics that species won't really escape from.
How about this? I mean, Sony and all the other big technology companies, they're talking about virtual reality that's so good, it's so accurate. By the way, hi Salty, hi Powder, hi Tigger, hi KLC, hi Lawrence. Welcome, Lawrence. Good to see you. And everybody else out there, Light Switch, everybody. The deal is, think of just for a moment, think that you might want to ascend to either where you came from or what you ultimately are at your primary level of what we are, or to be descendant onto this earth, and you've got the best virtual reality in the world. You mean, you've had your genes modified, all sorts of new capabilities there. That is all on this 3D plane.
Don't you think that we are virtual reality in our natural state? We're talking about consciousness being injected into a meat suit.
Got an answer for you. I got an answer for you.
Dude. That's Avatar, man.
Okay, from a 3D vantage point, from a three-dimensional linear time space vantage point, we are virtual reality. But from that standpoint, this is the meat suit existence. This is the limited.
Yeah, the construct that you're talking about is a synthetic facsimile, a replica of
precisely
the real world. And as the real world, as the organic original virtual reality that is being injected into a meat suit, and here we are, as that existence gets crappier and crappier and less healthy, like the environment's literally becoming less healthy to live in, and people are becoming poor and impoverished, they're going to want the facsimile. And so it is a hijacking of the time with which the consciousness has been injected into the meat suit to do something else with that consciousness, to do something else with the meat suit or some combination thereof.
And it's almost a fake. It's almost that somehow
facsimile. Right.
Exactly. It's a fake. It's a real fake, and it will never be. It will never satiate what one's inner desire to get back to their, if my postulate is correct, to their higher ascendant spiritual self. It will never be able.
I agree and I disagree.
Then we got to talk about
it. If the meat suit and the soul or the spirit is captured young, or is intercepted young, because when you're born, you're literally a blank slate. I mean, outside of what's encoded in your genetics, you're a blank slate. So if you're never even taught.
I disagree. The ascendant self came into the meat suit, and the meat suit is a blank slate, but the ascendant self was
That's
not.
what I'm saying. If it's intercepted early on, then the stimuli that's applied to the meat suit would override the natural development and formation of the ascendant consciousness,
Agree.
And at that point, you have hijacked that soul or that consciousness's period of time here in the third dimension to do whatever it is they were going to do.
I'm glad you put that qualification in there, that it's only for this period of time, because remember, from right now, you're talking about it all in this 3D existence, but it could only temporarily hijack the spiritual self.
Well, I listened to something the other day, or read it, I don't recall, but what they indicated was that there's this belief out there, and I don't necessarily subscribe to it, but just for the sake of this discussion where we're at, that souls are recycled, and that residue, if you will, from each time a soul is put into a body or into a life form, whatever that may be, because we may not be the only vessels out there in the cosmic reality. A residue is taken with that soul, and so when they come back, wherever they go next, they take a piece of the vessel that they've been in over and over and over. And there's lots of cultures out there, even on Earth, that believe in reincarnation. And so it's this idea that there's a limited number of souls, and if you were to hijack the meat suits, if you were to overwrite and re-engineer the genetic code of the planet, it wouldn't matter what life form was here after that genetic rewrite. You would be able to steer and evolve the soul, the spirit world, over a period of time. And when you're talking about time being irrelevant, I have a feeling that once that's done, there is a significant, potentially interdimensional paradigm shift that's going to occur, because in reality there is no time. We only perceive time because that's how we exist.
That's right.
And so if you were to manifest through people this idea of a complete genetic rewrite, as in the days of Noah, so to speak, to use that idea, if you were to do a genetic rewrite, ultimately you would have a paradigm shift whereby something, whatever you want to call it, some other energy, ethereal energy, some consciousness, whatever, is literally going to overtake the natural genetic algorithms that exist here on this planet.
The genetics is only in this 3D world.
But the genetics house the information by which we understand, perceive consciousness. So it's think of it like overtaking. It's like ripping apart a Mac and putting a PC BIOS bootstrap in it.
Yep.
So you still have what looks like a computer. It might be sleek and sexy and, feel really good, but it doesn't work very well after, you put a PC guts inside of a Mac. And I'm
because it was infected with
here for all you Mac
Gatesisms.
lovers out there.
Right. All right, I see where you're going, and I'm not convinced.
By the way, fuck Bill Gates. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm not convinced that there's anything that can be done on this plane, and I'm assuming that the rest of the people watching and listening are going with us on this voyage. That there are other planes of the essence of whatever it is that we are, the spiritual creature. I use the word spiritual, and not in a religious sense, but in a higher ascendant sense. I am not convinced that no matter what you do to those genetics here on Earth, that you have, manipulated, changed, added, augmented, or whatever it is, that at any point in time, that it can capture the higher self for anything other than a limited period of time, as is seen from the vantage point of this 3D world. This is temporal. We're talking about temporal versus timeless.
Yeah, so there was
one point I would agree is I think there probably, it feels like, to me, intuitively feels like there are a finite number of life essences. That it's not an infinite number of life essences. I just intuitively feel like you're right about that.
And I don't, if I had to choose one way or another on that, I would say I disagree with that personally, because it goes back to quantum. If you could take a parent cell and smash it and have two daughter cells and one be completely inverted from the other, then at some point, then those daughter cells or daughter photons could theoretically be smashed again and then smashed again and then smashed again. And they all are representative from the original fissure, just like cell division, and it's cell replication. I think that would be true. And so you would get this constant waterfalling effect of consciousness where it becomes more and more and more and more and more and more and more. I don't really necessarily think, at least on the surface, that I agree with this idea of limited vessels.
Then you got me confused, but I want to agree with you because I feel as if consciousness is expanding. And whether we're just becoming more aware or whether we're actually, we may not even know it, we may be connecting with more and more of...
I think the idea of expanding consciousness is more so in alignment with why the push to imprison, because if you can control the physical layer, if you can control the physical hardware, then you have greater control over the software, regardless of what software comes in. And when I'm referring to the physical carcass, the wet meat bag, the meat suit that is a human, if you can automate the mechanics of that up to and including neurons firing, complex neural circuits firing, it won't matter what consciousness is ultimately put in there at the moment of conception. You will have some influence, and as we move forward, it will be a greater and greater and greater influence over the consciousness that's in there. And that's not even taking into consideration being able to potentially construct electromagnetic or other types of fields, quantum fields, to then begin to tune in specific consciousness resonance types and tune out other consciousness resonance. I'm talking about
I don't want to agree with you, but I'm
dimensions
forced.
And walling off and putting up a force field around other dimensions. You want to talk about dimensional warfare, folks.
I'm forced to agree with you about that. I don't want to, but I'm forced to agree with you.
Yeah. And more of that will be validated if we ever do get through this document.
So interesting points people are raising out on there. First of all, one Light Switch mentioned who's driving. And who's driving? Well, from where I was coming from 5 minutes ago, what I'd like to think is who's driving is your or my higher spiritual, individual, unique essence. That's who I'd like to think is always driving, but TMC is making some compelling points here.
So I disagree with what you just said. Your higher self, you're here, dude. You're not anywhere. You are here. Here. So
I don't have to be. I don't have to be here.
You don't, but you are. So who's driving you while you are? And what it is, I think what it is,
right.
is it's a partnership. This is where the genetics piece comes in. It gets kind of weird, man. So go with me on it. It's a partnership with you and every other person that has been you before you were you to get you here now. However many times humans procreated to ultimately end up with a baby indigo.
Yep.
They're gone, except for some, perhaps. I don't know your
except for what's been passed on down into
your genetics.
This one.
It's in your genetics, which resonate naturally.
Okay, hold it.
Bingo,
resonates
buddy.
Naturally with the
Why the
self.
genetic tie? Why the genetic push? Why this push to overwrite the genetic code of the planet? And it's because the electromagnetic, when I say electromagnetic, it's not just radio signals, folks. It's light, it's gamma rays, it's X-ray, it's all of it. We resonate with that. It's in the terahertz range and beyond. The DNA is an actual antenna amongst other
and all those electromagnetics are
and so when you talk about this absolute, this infinite consciousness, when we die and the soul goes or the consciousness goes and it goes into other dimensions, and this document we're looking at actually talks about it, the gateway experience, where when you flow through, your consciousness flows through, ultimately it goes back to the absolute. And so the absolute is everything and it's nothing, and it can receive and understand what's going on with respect to time. And time isn't necessarily exclusively relevant here. It may be different or look differently in other dimensions.
Correct.
Only because something is in motion. We understand motion as a definition or being compared and contrasted to time. So that's what we understand motion as. So anything in motion is compared and contrasted to the absolute, which is in complete and total rest. That is infinity. It is everything. It is the creator, cosmic spirit, if you will. And so this idea of all of your genetics and all of your ancestors having come before you, being encoded into your DNA, pieces of that exist in you that then are able to resonate with potentially their consciousness after they are no longer here, because they were that. So there is this tie, this genetic memory that exists. And if that can be severed, if that can be overridden, or if that can be turned off, all of a sudden now you were able to manipulate the species in ways that are unimaginable to a person who doesn't necessarily even understand or subscribe to this idea that your genetics hold your ancestral memory, your race memory. And what I mean by race, I'm talking about the human race. Not a color, not a sovereign nation, not a culture, none of it. It is the human race memory.
It's a very, very, very long memory. The amount of information that is stored in DNA is absolutely humongous.
Yeah, and so that's why I think this push for the GMO food and the nanotech and the RNA and the vaccines, and I mean they're making foods now that are quote unquote vaccines, and mosquitoes to be genetically modified to provide vaccine delivery. All of it is to insert genetic software into your body, and the question really is why?
Why? Right.
While simultaneously constructing electromagnetic systems that completely overpower naturally occurring incandescent types of electromagnetic waves, we're building polarized, focused electromagnetic nets that are going to be able to control what resonant energies we exist in. This think of it like a biodome. When you go to Mars or the moon and you need to have a biodome to create an atmosphere within, well, that's what I think they're doing with the electromagnetics. And then you talk about the satellite grid that's going up in addition to the terrestrial grid that's going up, and you have basically created
a big biodome,
a mesh around and within and throughout this planet that then is able to tune with AI and cognitive radio. They're able to tune whatever they want, wherever they want, within specific spectrums of the electromagnetic spectrum. And all of that ties into us, man. We resonate. We're giant antennas. The meat suit, that's what the meat suit is. It's a giant antenna. That's what we are.
Well, let me take you back, and Tigger's counseling us not to argue so much.
Oh no, it's not arguing.
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, so, this is called spirited debate, folks.
Go to where I've got my pointer here. Okay, the concept of visible reality, i.e. the created world, being an emanation of an omnipotent and omniscient divinity who is, now just imagine, if you would, for a minute, that we are a piece, or that some element of us, some element of the highest essence of what we are as individual life forms, if you want to use that term. And I use it loosely because it's not just earthly life, it is energy form, intelligent energy forms, and that we're a piece of it. Omniscient divinity who is completely unknowable in his, and I would substitute its or his primary state, depending on your religion, primary state of being. So that gets back to the point that I was trying to make, which is that no matter what is done on this earthly plane, there is something unknowable and higher that it really can't be corrupted by anything that's done in this reality. I know where you're going, but are you following where I was trying to take us in a different?
Yeah, that's the philosophical idea of God is in control, and to some extent I agree with that. But when you look at what's being done here, there is circumstantial proof, if you will, that they know that whatever they're doing here has an impact elsewhere. Now, whether or not that affects the absolute, that's a philosophical debate to be had, because ultimately whatever happens is supposed to happen, which then ties back to God is in control, and it's all part of that master plan. So in reality, you can take two different views of that. I don't have to worry about it because God's in control, because there is a master plan, and whatever happens is supposed to happen. You could take that position and step back and just go along for the ride. Or you could take the other position of what is my unique role in this plan?
Yes.
Is my unique role to sit back on my ass and eat popcorn?
Right.
Or am I supposed to get engaged and do something constructive with my life, something that's meaningful, something that is impactful to me, that I think that I feel compelled to do?
Do we even know how to own our unique role, or do
that is what has been trained out of us?
It's been precisely. Hi, Dee Dee Bender. Good to see you. Exactly right. It's been trained out of us. It has been programmed. It has been habituated out of us, and it's been done so masterfully. Wow. I'm going to pull some more out of this document.
Yeah, we got to get into the, there's this thing about the hologram coming up here.
Where do you want to go? I'll scroll it.
Well, the hologram down here, it's the last little couple sentences. The hologram is a mirror image of the absolute in infinity, still exists outside time and space, but it is one step removed from the absolute and is the actual agent of all creation, all reality.
I think that's important, that it's one step removed from the absolute.
And so what that kind of reminds me of is this idea that people are now coming out saying, that this reality is a hologram, that this is a simulation, and that we're just like this construct from different things like gravity sort of bleeding into this reality that's creating this.
Maybe not a simulation, but that it's a reflection in at a lower dimensional level. Maybe not. They're trying to make a simulation, but maybe in its natural state, it's really just a reflection of.
Well, you could argue that it's a simulation that has evolved to the point that wants to make its own simulation. So when you think about AI,
and it's happening here and now. Yes, you definitely can make that argument.
Think about the way they're making AI. They're making AI to be able to train AI. They'll make computers and robots that make robots. So this notion it's not a new notion. And when you just take that general concept or idea and try to put it out into as large of a macro scale as you can, then perhaps it's true. Perhaps we are a wisp or a thought, a simulation that now has evolved to the point or gone far enough along in the story whereby we are making our own simulations, which will then potentially evolve to make other simulations. What if we are just a stepping stone in a larger evolutionary story?
That includes AI?
I'm talking about the species.
Wait a minute. One that includes AI and AI training AI and being self-replicating, self-adaptive type?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I don't even want to say devil's advocate here, but in reality, that's kind of what it is. Building a beast system and then trying to convince people that, you guys got to go now. Thanks for playing. Thanks for building me. Now you got to go. So it really is playing devil's advocate as it relates to what I just said, being that the consideration, if you will, from a philosophical point of view, a consideration of humans just being a stepping stone in a story, one chapter in a story of life. That is the way I think that the global elite view the species when you start hearing them talk about transhumanism and this idea of the fourth industrial revolution and the Great Reset, and this idea that this is going to usher in this notion of transhumanism where we are going to evolve the species. They view us as a resource that is simply nothing more than a chapter in a book or a stepping stone along the way to some larger evolution of what they are trying to redefine as life.
Trying to redefine. They're not going to succeed. I maintain that no matter what level of, from this vantage point, transhumanism, it's a tiny step, okay? And it's never going to be enough to reach that level of approximating a oneness with the absolute. It's just never going to happen. That's just my feeling.
I'm curious to see how public they're going to get with the sophistication of their quantum equipment.
Hold on a second. Light switch. Clarify that question. Point in time. What would you mean by point in time? I'll be watching the chat for you. Go ahead, TMC. Sorry for the interruption.
So I'm curious if how much they're going to disclose about the sensitivity of their quantum tools, instrumentation, communication, and offense and defense, and whatever it is that the military has. Because if this is true, if this idea of multidimensional activity is true, and this was being considered and contemplated by the military, this is one of many papers, I'm sure. This one just, is declassified, that discuss interacting with interdimensional energy, interdimensional intelligence, if you will. I really, really, really wonder what our role is, what our fate is as we move forward, because we are putting up the permanent infrastructure now to drive open space, open air quantum networks with the equivalent of a high-speed internet that we understand today. High-speed internet, like as we understand today. So think of the quantum internet of today as being similar to something like the early form of Prodigy or AOL. And when we talk about 5G and we talk about the satellite networks going up to support it and the small cell deployment that's millions and millions and millions of phased array antennas.
But even if it's huge, at the end of the day, it's still limited. It's still within a confine. It's still got boundaries.
Unless those quantum networks are tied in to interdimensional gateways.
Right. Right. That's in my opinion, the quantum reality that's where it's at. That is ultimately where everything is at. And so I can't refute. I have to.
So if the brain, going back to the overarching concept of the title of the show, right? If the brain has quantum activity, if the brain is a quantum computer,
which we're going to talk about. If we have time, we're going to talk about
and
that
if we
tonight.
don't, we can. Yeah, if that's true, and I think it is, and there's been a heavy push since the 2000s, and publicly a heavy push since 2013 with the Brain Initiative to wire up the brain, know the brain better than the brain knows itself, to be able to read and write to the brain. You're putting biologic interdimensional gateways onto a network that is ultimately going to be a quantum network. And so what we're really looking at is this idea of being able to tune interdimensional gateways. And it's not necessarily just a Stargate. Like you think, oh, they're going to have this giant machine and it's going to be this Stargate and it's a interdimensional portal and all the demons are going to come flying out and they're going to be transferred into people. No. It's quite the opposite.
Right.
If the brain is a quantum computer, if you can pray and you can interact in the quantum dimensions or through quantum mechanics in two other dimensions, if they can access the brain, decode the brain, and they are able to tune each individual, you then have a gateway in every single node you have on the network. And I'll not replace the word node with the brain.
If they can get to the point where they are interfacing bidirectional communication with our higher quantum aspect of the way that our brains probably work.
So you say higher, and I say tunable, because what I think they're after is masking or walling off ascension, quote unquote, and allowing the lower dimensional energies, the demons, if you will, lower dimensional energies to be cut loose upon humanity. That ultimately results in what the Bible proverbially calls Armageddon, the final battle, if you will. And I know that I probably lost a lot of people who aren't necessarily religious, but when you think about this, if you can consider for a moment that there is other consciousness out there that exists outside of a human.
Yep, exactly.
How do you talk to it? If you can talk to it, have humans been able to do that? And if humans have been able to do that, are humans able to build mechanical networks to be able to allow those other dimensional consciousness into the species?
Maybe.
And you can look up
the way that we would
and their secret programs, and they've been trying to use the meat suit as a vessel for a long time. And then we could even bring up cloning at this point, and the whole public disclosure as it relates to uploading your consciousness and transferring your consciousness and being able to download it into a new body or into silicon. All of these concepts are very, very, very interrelated. And it's this idea that we are vessels.
I agree, KLC. I agree with you. Yes, obviously, we'd all agree with that. And Powder, I didn't get to your comment yet, but we'll talk about it.
Anyway, one
summarial thing that I would say from so far in this discussion is, under no conditions should any of us allow ourselves to buy into a limited nature of our consciousness, or that it requires anything that comes out of the technology world. Nothing. We have everything we need already built in. It's already there. So I would just say that. Do not buy into the limitation. Our higher sentient essence of our intelligent life forms in my world, at least for the way that I need to cope with life here on little old Earth, is you cannot imprison me in a limited pattern of my outlook on reality. Just can't be done. I won't let it. Although I might be wrong, but I'd rather think that way than more pessimistically. But that's just me.
Don't forget to take your shots.
Oh, I want my dot. I want my dot, man. I want my quantum dot. Yeah. Get inoculated. Okay.
What else you got?
There's some very interesting reading in here. Would you like to read this? This is very thought-provoking stuff. Would you like to go a little further into this?
Yeah. I think we should, well, tell you what, let me, I'm going to steal share real quick, and I'll show you where I think we should go next week, and we'll finish with this and see how far we get.
Okay.
Where we're going to go is here. And what this is a heuristic view on quantum biophoton cellular communication, quantum biology. They talk about quantum satellites being put up. Briefly, quantum biology is where physics meets biology. Both classical physics and quantum mechanics may be operational in cell communication. Each living cell talks with other cells with incredible precision, accuracy to maintain synchrony, unity of purpose, and health. Each cell may be envisioned as communicating intelligence. The vehicle for cell signaling and passing information is either chemical, electromagnetic, or by quantum transfer.
Yep, hold it right there. Or by quantum transfer of all of the above. Rocco, how you doing tonight? I'm watching for your comments. You usually have some good ones out there.
This is where we're going to go. I think because it's relative to trying to blend and merge these ideas of the quantum space and how it interacts with our body. And this is very real,
spelling it right out
by renowned people. Like they're very. Look these people up.
This is right here in black and white. All right, it's right there. This is what they're working on. Why?
So,
we know why. We know why.
Yeah, that's where I think we should go there soon, Indy, because it's going to tie this even more in together. But let's go back to the
get it coming up.
Let's see what we can do with that in the last few minutes here. 45 minutes.
Yep. All right, here it is. Okay, this is very, very thought-provoking reading. And it ties into a whole lot of what has been written, religious literature over the centuries that has come out. Okay, we covered that. The concept of the omnipotent and omniscient divinity. Okay, the absolute at rest is a concept straight out of Hebrew mystical philosophy. Even the Christian concept of the Trinity shines through the description of the absolute as presented in this paper. And they get, if we read further, we'll find that he addresses the subject of the absolute and relation to it more and more. The description of energy totally at rest in infinity fits the Christian metaphysical concept of the Father, while the infinite self-consciousness resident in that energy, providing the motive force of will to bring a portion of that energy into motion. And by the way, by bringing it into motion, it brings it into our reality, into our 3D world. Energy into motion to create reality corresponds with the sun. That's referring to the Son of God here. So just grasp the concept that infinite at rest is completely non-detectable. So if one were to equate God with the infinite, and if the infinite was at rest, the only way that we could ever have a perception of anything associated with it would be if there was a proxy for that took earthly form. And in taking earthly form, it now is providing a temporal and motive force of will to bring a portion of that energy from the divine or the infinite into motion, substitute word, onto earth to create reality correspondent with the sun. Did I paraphrase that good?
Yeah, you're basically saying what this next sentence says. In order to attain self-consciousness, the consciousness of the absolute must project a hologram of itself and then perceive it.
Yes, right. And the hologram is an image of, or a reflection of, or a facsimile of the absolute in infinity, but it's the only way that we, while living in space-time, can perceive anything in reference to that which lives outside of space-time. So still exists outside space-time, but is one step removed from the absolute and is the actual agent. Oh, look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. Is the actual agent of all creation, all reality from this vantage point. What I get from this is we think in such limited ways on this planet. And that's how we started our discussion. You know, we're talking about being flooded with sensory input from the tangible world. It's like it drowns out so much of this stuff. But you have to marvel at many of the old religious works of literature that have been written, that they try to bring us to a higher level. They try to take us out of this very, very small biosphere that we live in here and look at something bigger. Let's go further. Okay, now he gets into talking a little bit about the procedures that they actually used in, and you may, if you remember, we neither one of us has looked at this in a while. Let's just try to guide each other through it a little bit if we can.
It's basically, it's talking about how to put yourself into a state of being, state of mind, if you will, to get to interdimensional or out of body activation or communication. And then they talk about when you get good at it, the speed will progress, and it's a function of the number of hours practicing. So these are the mechanics of actually trying to get through getting into that state where you're able to induce a resonance in basically an acoustic resonance in your blood system, your vascular system, and then get your brain waves at a particular frequency using binaural beat wave entrainment.
Yep, that and not in such disharmony with the Schumann resonance either, and coming up with a kind of an overall resonance with all of, I would almost go so far as to say with resonance at some level with the entire universe. But
yes, it's literally just trying to quantify as scientifically as possible, getting into deep transcendental type meditation in order to get past the physical self.
I'm going to go right to the conclusion. There is a sound and rational basis in terms of physical science parameters for considering the gateway experience to be plausible in terms of its essential objectives, those objectives being the resonance that we were just talking about. Intuitional insights of not only personal but of a practical and professional nature would seem to be within the bounds of reasonable expectations. And this is old work that was done. I marvel at the idea that this was done so many years ago. And he talks about the mechanics of utilizing the gateway experience. And we don't need to go into that. I'm going to pull this down for just a second while I look further around in here.
There are some pieces at the end of that literally discuss interdimensional
trying to get there.
Consciousness and having to defend against it, and having 3 different people enter at different resonances to do remote viewing. And
do you remember keywords? Let me do a Control F and try to find those.
Just go to the end.
Okay, go to the end. All right, I'm at the very end before the credits. I'll put it back up again.
Yeah, throw it back up. I'll be able to. We can scroll real quick, and I'll be able to find it. It was. They had a couple different. Out of body together. Keep going. We're focus 21, so we're getting close. Yeah, scroll up a little bit more.
Up or down?
Up, like earlier in the document.
Okay.
Okay. So you were at the conclusion, right? It sounds rational.
Yep.
That was the conclusion.
Right there. Yep.
Okay. So let's read the conclusion, and then we'll breeze through these bullet points here. So there's a sound rational basis in terms of the physical science parameters for considering the gateway to be plausible in terms of its essential objectives. Institutional insights of not only personal, but of practical and professional nature would seem to be within the bounds of reasonable expectations. However, a phased approach for entering the gateway experience in an accelerated mode would seem to be required if the time needed to reach advanced states of altered consciousness is to be brought within a more manageable limit. From the standpoint of establishing an organization-wide exploitation of the gateway's potential. So what they're talking about is having this process so well planned out that they're able to deploy it with platoons, brigades, battalions. That's what we're talking about, organization-wide exploitation of the gateway's potential. So taking this idea of being able to take a brain and putting it interdimensionally and to be able to do things like remotely view other places on the planet or somewhere else, or to talk with interdimensional consciousness, and then doing that from a military organization perspective. This is what this is saying here.
Out in the chat, Powder, tell us a little bit more, if you would, about your experience as a meditator for 10 years in earlier times. And to Rocco's point, is prayer a form of recoding? You could say that it could be a form of quieting all of those sensory inputs and bringing the mind to a different place. And then there was something else. Tigger also wrote, we must be of a spirit to come into. Yes. We do an awful, well, I don't necessarily say we do it, but humans here on this planet do a whole lot to block off our access to those spiritual levels. So there are a number of ways of getting, quieting all that noise down or stopping the flood. But there's a whole lot about quieting things down and allowing other senses to percolate up, or resonance to begin to entrain oneself into a resonance with those with something that expands far further out than just this little place that we live here. I don't know if that made any sense. I'm trying to address what people are saying. And
yeah, it's fine. It's basically the constant struggle between the sensations and what drives the carnal, what drives the physical, that's basically drowning out the rest of what's going on around us. And most of us live in the carnal.
So they give a little mechanism here. If I go from A and B to E, and I'm skipping a little bit, but begin using the hemisync tapes, which are for the purpose of synchronizing both hemispheres of the brain, because if they're on different frequencies and they're on different pages, it ain't going to work like it needs to reach these higher levels.
Well, the hemisync, and the hemisync tapes would be like a series of tapes to do different things. You would use different tapes for achieving different states. Yep. Like if you wanted to jump to one plane versus another, they would use different frequencies to entrain your brain. I mean, I think about this is like they would hand a captain like a case of these things, and inside the case there was a kit of tapes, and you got to think of the time and when this was written. This was in the 80s, so tapes were it, right, to deploy. And they would have 50 kits in a case, and they would hand a platoon or two platoons a case of these things and say, here you go, learn. And you have lots and lots of people trying to induce this hemisync and transcendental type, altered states of consciousness type of activity.
I wonder what happens if you get a group of people together and they're all utilizing the same tracks to get to the same approximate sync of brainwave patterns. I wonder if there's anything that happens when you have a group. It's fascinating. Mm-hmm. We could do that on this show sometime. We could all wind up someplace we never even knew where we were going to go.
No.
So A is using the tapes. Now the tapes, they call them tapes, and they were tapes, but what these things really do is they use binaural beat frequencies from one side, one ear, and that also is analogous to one side of the brain, one hemisphere of the brain, with the other. And with those binaural beats, it begins to entrain the brain waves so that not only are the left and the right together, but they're also at a certain frequency. And then with different hemisync input, the actual frequency of that synchronized brain can either be lowered down to delta level or elevated up to higher levels. And that's what they're doing with that. Then they add in point B, adding in strong REM sleep frequencies to induce left brain quiescence and deep physical relaxation. Then I'm going to skip to E. Then repeat steps A and B following the use of auto-hypnotic suggestion that an out-of-body movement will occur and could be remembered. Repeating step E, now I went to F. Repeating step E to achieve facility in gaining out-of-body state under conscious control. That would be pretty wild. Alter hypnotic suggestion to stress ability to consciously control out-of-body movement and maintain it even after the REM sleep state ends. Wow. They worked on this. This is major stuff they were doing then. Anyway, that's that. Conclusions. We were at the, that's actually.
Keep going.
Okay. I'll put it back up. Sorry. Yep. Here it comes.
Let me, I lost the Zoom. Here it is.
Okay. It's back.
So towards the bottom of that, keep going. You're almost at that point where.
Okay.
Yeah, keep scrolling. Okay, here it is. Encourage pursuit of full self-knowledge by all individuals involved in the foregoing experiments to enhance objectivity in the out-of-body observation, thinking, and to remove personal energy blockages likely to retard rapid progress.
Right.
So here's what gets interesting. Be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent, non-corporeal energy forms when space-time boundaries are exceeded.
Woo! Wow.
Intelligent, non-corporeal, meaning not inside a corpse, not inside a body, not inside a meat suit.
In other words, the suggestion here is that other life forms, which might have meat suits, by the way, somewhere else, they also have a non-corporeal aspect to themselves.
But
and
if you were
so
to
do
encounter,
we.
If you were to encounter them while you were out of your body, they could also be out of their body. So now you're literally engaged in the spirit world, quote unquote. And I'm using that term just so it's commonly understood, right? Where your consciousness is out of your body and you could potentially be interacting with someone else's consciousness who's out of their body or something else that functions in that plane. Non-corporeal energy forms when space-time boundaries are exceeded, arranged to have groups of people in focus 12 state, one of the many states, 12 being a number, one of the states, unite their altered consciousness to build holographic patterns around sensitive areas to repulse possible unwanted out-of-body presences. So now we're talking about psychic freaking force fields. So think of the 300.
Well, we're talking about malevolent energy forces, malevolent consciousness.
And we're talking about groups of people putting up interlocking shields so they can keep out unwanted presences. So think about battle formations and battle tactics for the military going into interdimensional exploration or interdimensional combat. This is how this is written.
It is.
Encourage more advanced gateway participants to build holographic patterns of successful attainment and rapid progress for advanced colleagues to assist them in progressing through the gateway system. So you send in the veterans, and then the veterans kind of drag along the noobs and teach them how to go and where to go. Same thing. It's oriented the same way you would train people in 3D. This is how this is written. So if these experiments are carried through, it is to be hoped that we will truly find a gateway to gateway and to the realm of practical application for the whole system of techniques which comprise it. A gateway to gateway.
Yes, I caught that.
Truly find a gateway to gateway. Mm-hmm. Now imagine if they were to measure your brain while groups of people were doing this, and
this
then,
is what I say.
And then automate it.
I still
run
say
software and automate it. And then to that note, keep scrolling. Keep that in mind, because I'm going to show you a patent. I'm going to show you a patent in a minute.
Tune them all.
Is that
in. It? Okay, where are we going?
That's it. Let me have share. I'm going to show you.
Okay. While you're getting that, you pause for just a second. Powder, really powerful. You would not trade your walk with God and would what you have learned for anything. You stated you had a mantra that wouldn't leave your head, but God delivered you from it, delivered you of it, and you don't think about it anymore. Good, you moved on. You evolved. Powder, what I get from that is you evolved to a higher level, and you attained a greater spiritual oneness with your Creator. And Rocco, I don't know what could happen, but always glad to read your comments. Oh, man.
So on that note, right, being able to automate, if you were to do this and train people and have some tangible feedback.
Well, this whole group thing is really powerful. Having more people, a group of people together and have them all be connected by this resonance. I think that's huge. And what if, TMC, what if by way of technology that we see being deployed and implemented all around us, somebody's got a plan to try to entrain massive numbers of people, and we don't know what they're trying to entrain them to be or do?
Yeah.
What if?
So here's an example of how something like that would be applied for different applications, but nonetheless, it's representative that the mechanics for automation, the mechanics for providing stimulation to the brain to groups of people exist. And this is one of many that I found. Cognitive enhancement using feedback. This is a Lockheed Martin patent from back in 2014.
Amazing.
And so it determines a target frequency of a brain or a state in the brain. So, alpha frequency, beta frequency, theta frequency, or a combination of it.
Dude, 2014, Lockheed Martin is working to try to target brain frequencies.
Oh man, this is just one of many.
Yeah, go on.
One of many. With it, and everybody thinks we're back in the 1950s, man, and we're just so far advanced.
Just for a second, tying this back into the first part of the discussion here tonight, which is the quantum capacities of the mind, the brain, the human mind, human consciousness. It's way more powerful than we have been led to believe that it is. What if someone is working to harness that for their purposes, and we don't know that they're doing it? Now, I'm not getting all into conspiracy theory and all that stuff, but what if? Look at the patent that we're reading right now.
Yeah. And when we dig into this patent, it talks about using light and sound injected into the eyes or the ears to be able to create a frequency that the brain will pick up on to put the brain into a particular frequency. So that's what this is basically saying here, is that it's able to read the brain, and then it's able to stimulate the brain using feedback, right? It's taking a reading of the brain, stimulating the brain, then it's reading the brain, then it's stimulating the brain to make the adjustments. To attempt to achieve a brain state, a targeted brain state in a user. The stimulating step may include measuring an electrical output of the brain of the user received from one or more sensors coupled to the user. Wonder how we could do that with modern things like watches and headphones and or just with antennas. Determining a current frequency associated with the brain of a user based on the measured electrical output, and determining the difference between the current frequency and the targeted resonant frequency. And I added resonant in there. When the difference between the current frequency and the target frequency is greater than a predetermined amount, so there are thresholds, the method includes sending a signal to the brain, injecting information, injecting energy into the brain of a user through one or more pathways.
Most likely electromagnetically.
Modify. What's that?
Most likely electromagnetically steered by optics.
Well, it uses, they talk about using light and sound basically into the eyes and the ears.
Sound, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So cognitive enhancement through controlling the entrainment of brainwaves, which is exactly what that last document was all about, can improve cognitive function, thereby improving mission performance. Additionally, using a feedback loop may allow for active modification of a device-generated input signal. So
just because in 1984 work was done primarily around using hemisync and audio frequencies, the technology has advanced, so there's now a whole number of other ways to interface with the brain.
Yeah, once the biologic code is understood, then it's just a matter of finding how to translate whatever it is you want to use into biologic code and then messing with the brain. It's been a long time since I've looked at this patent, but it says here, any network is suitable to facilitate this kind of communication between the components of the cognitive enhancement system. Really? A network may include interconnecting system capable of transmitting electrical, audio, video, light, data, messages, signals, and any combination. It could be a public switch telephone network.
Wow. Yep.
A LAN. A MAN, which is a metropolitan area network, which is kind of how telecommunications work, a wide area network, which is connecting different cities together, a local, regional, or global communication or computer network, such as the internet, a wireline or wireless network, an enterprise intranet, or any suitable communication link. Signals. Okay, stimulation devices may be used to provide signals to the brain of a user in certain embodiments. Those signals may cause neurons in the brain of a user to fire at a target frequency. That is, the stimulation signal adjusts the brain wave to be in synchrony with the stimulation signal.
Right. We're talking about brain control.
What's that?
We're talking about brain control here.
Yes. And an example of this would be to deploy a system like this on an aircraft where you have a flight crew that's got nukes on board, or a fuel tanker that's waiting for a mission critical refuel, and they've been up there for 14 hours and they're all tired as shit. And you can measure and evaluate the efficiency and the awake state of your crew. And if someone's fallen out, then you stimulate their brain and keep their ass awake until the mission's over.
Yep.
That's what this stuff would be used for in a very basic sense.
And I might add, that's usually going to be pretty harmful to the person biologically. The brain, the body and the mind need rest. Okay, it's overstimulation.
Temporary stimulation.
It'll work. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, come on, dude. You're gonna have an enlisted guy who's
expendable.
No, it's not expendable. He's been doing his job for 3 or 4 years, and he maybe he went to a party last night, and now he's got a mission, and he's flying stateside, and he's going somewhere across the ocean, and he just walks into work the next day, reports for duty. He's like, hey, you're going. And by the way, you're going for a week. And next thing you know, this guy's functioning on 3 hours of sleep. He's hungover. He ate like shit the last 2 days because he's been partying his ass off.
And nobody cares.
Puts on a flight helmet, and now he's expected to run for 18 hours at optimum performance. But this compensates for that.
But they'll run him, and it will be at the expense of basically his biological systems, because they need rest and recharge and repair. And if they don't get that, they'll get the mission done. He'll do his job. But after that, he's going to be damaged.
Check this out. Brain state databases may be any component configured to store frequencies and associated brain states, so databases for brainwaves. For example, brain state database may be in Microsoft Access or in Microsoft Excel. Brain state database may be a table associating a plurality of frequencies, many frequencies corresponding to target brain states in certain embodiments. An example would be a brain state may have a cell for post-traumatic stress disorder and associated cell for a targeted brain frequency for improving a user's PTSD condition. Another example, brain state database may have a cell for a target brain state of expert and corresponding frequency. A brain state database may include target frequencies based on research that indicates a target brain state corresponds to a particular frequency in some embodiments. They can tune your brain and use a database to run how you think, feel, act, respond.
Right.
You want to talk about automating and automation of people and overriding the mechanics of the meat suit. This is one patent of many that discuss the military industrial complex.
Don't you think that some of this is being experimented with now on people that don't know that it's being done to them?
What's a mass shooter these days, dude?
Yeah. How does that just happen? Someone just does it. And then afterwards, they don't even know how or why they did it. Like, wow, gee, like they know nothing afterwards.
Yeah. they can wipe your brain just as much as they can stimulate it with good stuff. They can overdrive. Think about it. The brain functions in ion channels, so they can overdrive your ion channel flow in your brain and metaphorically melt your brain. If they just overdrive the ion channels and they blow up your ion channels, then your ion channels don't respond anymore like normal, and you turn into mush, like the crazy guy from Colorado sitting in court with his eyes wide open, just bombed out of his brain.
Do you remember seeing that?
Yeah.
Do you remember seeing that? Like, what happened to his mind? Right.
Outside of the psychiatric meds he was on, I mean, it's there. I can show you patents where they're able to remotely concentrate electromagnetic energy, so that what they do is they find a resonant structure nearby a target, and they phase energy on that nearby resonant structure, and then use that nearby resonant structure to reflect concentrated radiation to another target and hurt it.
Yep.
And hurt it.
Yep. Yep, exactly.
That's on humaninternet.org. I've got that patent's there, along with other directed energy weapon system type patents.
Yeah, we didn't mention that tonight. For the benefit of learning more about this stuff, go to TMC's website. He'll tell you about it. But yeah,
it's humaninternet.org, and I'll show you what it looks like, and that way you'll know you're there when you get there. And this is the welcome page here. I'm still working on it. It's raw. It's dirty.
It's navigable.
Website ever built.
Show people a little bit about how to navigate around on it. It works pretty good, actually.
So this is the welcome page, and I've highlighted really where we're going. And it's, you know what? I'll show you right now. We got some time, don't we, Andy? We got 15 minutes?
Yeah, we do.
Very good. I'll show you where we're going, where this idea of completely embedded virtual reality, where you don't need a phone anymore. It's all beamed right into your head. And this is from the X Prize. This Anna Avatar is an X Prize activity where they're trying to perfect remote automated robots and remote automation. So here you go. All right, so there's a lot to unpack there, but what you saw was this idea that remote access to the brain, remote interaction around the world, potentially to another planet, automation, virtual reality, all fusing together. And here's really some of the mechanics of how it works. AT&T patent, routing policies for biologic hosts. And in this patent, I'm taking these quotes out. This is one of the least analyzed patents on this website. I'm going to finish this analysis at some point. One person's intra-host network. So a network, like a computer network, they network your body down to your cells, your individual cells, are addressable. Different people and animals may conduct intra-host communications. In more simple terms, one person's brain may control another person's body, or vice versa. Granularity may even be finer, thus identifying biologic signals from a hand, finger, a toe, or even a cell. Cryptocurrencies using body activity, Microsoft, patent 2020-06-06-06. And this is blockchain, right? Stores a list of transactions. It's blockchain technology, can be thought of as a distributed electronic ledger that records transactions between source and destination. Exemplary embodiments of the present disclosure may use the human body activity associated with a task to provide a user a solution to mining challenges in crypto systems. You get paid to think, you get paid to do something that you're instructed to do, and it's tied to your body. So we have this idea of complete and total virtual reality, right? Into and out of your brain, all five senses and then some. And then this idea of being able to route and understand what's going on with your biology down to a cell. So everything is trackable down to a cell. And then you have a mechanism by which it can be monetized and controlled, and you commoditize the species. This is just the welcome page. Then there's the wireless piece, brain communication and remote control, some of what's out there. Google's Radar, which is now available in every Pixel phone that is able to do all kinds of fun things. Home and premises power lines for being able to interact with your brain waves and or sense your body movements. Directed energy systems, which is what we had discussed a minute ago. And Wi-Fi and ultra wideband, which is coming out in droves now in higher millimeter wave frequencies and coming to a phone near you. I'm building quantum communication. It's a very slow process. I have a lot of other things going on personally right now. Same thing with nanotechnology, brain stimulation with nanotech. How to deliver nanotechnology, magnetic nanoparticles, because that's going to be the most efficient way to interact with the complex phased array 5G antenna systems that we're putting up. Synthetic biotechnology, cyborg cells, Charles Lieber. Anybody out there who knows about Charles Lieber, I'll show you real quick. Charles Lieber worked on many projects, one of which was cyborg cells for the Air Force Research Lab, molecular nanoscale circuits for active control of cells. And it talks about in here, the goal of this work is to develop molecular nanoscale circuits that control cells via external radiation. Hashtag 5G. We developed silicon nanowire probes as platform elements of these circuits and demonstrated their insertion into single cells, followed by stimulation of the cells signaling, finally achieving a scalable modular nano device platform capable of recording high amplitude intracellular electrical signals in electrogenic cells, meaning your neurons, your brain, and your nervous system, and things like your heart.
Yep.
In parallel, we developed a conformal deposition technique and a site-selective deposition of polymers to modify probes so they can make complex circuits with these things. That's what they're talking about, being able to make nano circuits inside your body, and approach to decorate the nanowires with heavy metal-free quantum dot emitters that provide strong macroscopically addressable and reproducible nanoprobe emission signals.
You said quantum dot emitters.
Mm-hmm. They're luminescent, so they would emit photons. Quantum dot emitters. So they can emit light, or they can emit other types of energy, other photons. Light is just one of a few wavelengths in the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Quantum dot emitters basically emit photons.
I ran across something today wherein experimentation's being done using microtubules to convey quantum quantum entangled particles. I got it in my tabs here someplace.
Yeah.
I mean,
Can you
the
send
stuff
that to
they're
me?
working on is intense.
Yeah, please send that to me.
Absolutely.
Sounds real interesting. Cell stimulation using quantum dots. University of Colorado Boulder. Bioconjugated nanostructures. So synthetic nanostructures, preparing nanostructures and methods of detecting targets in subjects, methods of treating diseases in subjects so they can select where they want this stuff to go.
Creating diseases, curing or creating. Either way.
Yeah, and or through the pursuit of disease management, we'll say, one way or the other, disease management, they are able to understand what needs to be put on these synthetic bioconjugated nanostructures to deliver them to any part of the body they wish, including subsets of the brain and other organs. And it says here, their hydrophobic protection structures include capping ligands and amophilic copolymers, where the hydrophobic protection structure encapsulates a quantum dot.
Sure. Gets it to the target, protects it from being engulfed by a white blood cell or some, stupid thing like that.
Yeah, it says here, quantum dots are well suited for optical multiplexing, in which multiple colors and intensities are combined to encode genes, to encode proteins, and to encode small molecule libraries, because the body functions in light, which is what we should get into with the biophoton communication next week, because this is where this quantum bullshit is going, is putting in synthetic quantum dot bioconjugates to interact with your cells and treat your body as a fiber optic network.
Right. Independent wiring system in there. Fiber optic wiring, of course, but it's like
and I say fiber optic because everybody understands that as being communication with light. But what it is, it's free space optics, because you're not really putting fibers in the body. What you're doing is you're attaching things that emit photons to cells, or groups of things that emit photons to organs, so that you can stimulate what you want in the body to get a biologic response, which is then creating synthetic communication to your brain, because everything's driven from your brain.
Stimulate or inhibit. If you can consume
food, or if you can take medication that targets an organ, or if you can consume food that has site-selective stuff in it, then it then goes to other parts of your body, and those parts of your body become networked. Everything is tied to nerves. Your nerves are what sends the signaling to and from everything in your body. Everything in your body is tied to nerves. So what they're getting with that point is site selectivity to deposit this stuff anywhere in the body, which then taps into a nerve, which ultimately goes back to your brain.
Back to your brain. That's right. Always target brain. That's always in the equation. Yep.
That's really the mechanization of the meat suit to then override or imprison or interact directly with the consciousness. That's really what humaninternet.org is pursuing to illustrate. So I'll drop share. A couple minutes left.
Utterly amazing.
Indeed.
Oh, wow. Okay, so got something here, reference made by Powder, and we're going to follow up on this. Thank you very much, Powder. Anthony Patch has a magazine, a man named Anthony Patch.
Oh, yeah. And, I'm very familiar with Mr. Patch. His work, anyway.
Excellent. Well, I need to catch up, so thanks, you guys. I will do so. That's good.
Yeah, he puts out some good stuff. His earlier stuff, I think, was I don't want to say it's better. What he's putting out now is still very good, but he's putting layers on top of the fundamentals. And go watch the fundamentals for just
start there.
Start 2 years ago and work your way forward to now. And more of what he does now will make sense. Because he infuses a lot of it with it's all really from a biblical perspective. He's trying to illustrate where the Kabbalah, if you will, is going with respect to divination and basically manifesting end times. That's what they're working towards, because it's Luciferian and satanic. Yeah, Anthony Patch. That's his latest one. I haven't watched it. I don't watch him as much as I used to. A lot of it because I'm just too busy.
Yep.
But his earlier stuff is fantastic, and his magazine's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
CERN, New Age religion, apocalypse, creating 5G DNA.
That's different
guy.
Yeah. Yep. Well, he might be in there, or they might reference him, but you're getting off of his channel, really. If you click, yeah, there you go. There you go. This is his channel. Vector
answers.
And over the last like 15 months, his subscribership has grown tremendously, and he's tapped in. I don't mean tapped in like bad kind of tapped in. He's however he gets his information. And again, you go to this idea of quantum and divine intervention and having inspiration, so to speak, wherever he's getting, it's all good, man.
Look at this one on the 22nd of October. CERN, Large Hadron Collider, and he's probably even speculates a little bit about the God particle and Higgs bosons, etc.
Yeah, he's all into that.
I wonder about CERN. Man, I still haven't figured out what and why, but humongous equipment and humongous dollars thrown at that. And we don't get the whole story. We really don't.
Yeah. Part of the reason I don't watch him as much anymore is because I think that he's infused too much biblical prophecy into it.
He does tie a lot of that.
I watch it for the science piece of it. He's very, very technically oriented, and I don't fault him for what he's doing. Everybody is, I think, as a Christian, you're supposed to share your perception or your perspective of the Word of God. That really is what I think we're supposed to do here, is just to communicate ideas. So his ideas are his ideas. I respect him for his research that he does, and I respect his position, and whatever he has to say, I'll listen to. I don't discredit anything that he has to say just on the basis of, what's actually being said. I want to hear it and then form my own opinion as it relates to what he says. He's a highly intelligent individual, highly intelligent.
Yep. You know what? Thanks to you guys, I am going to listen to him. I'm going to check him out a little bit tonight and catch up with him. So that's really good. We're all kind of working together. We all help each other. The synergy of everybody. Maybe we're talking and we're putting up visuals here, but all of the collaborative effect with everybody out there in the chat. Salty, thanks for the compliment. Appreciate it. And Powder, you just threw in a good one for me. I mean, that just changes my day. I'm going to get some new input here, and I really want that. So that's good. We try to take the lead, but we never forget everybody else that's supporting the whole effort. And this is big. This is huge. I think we're done for the last thing. TMC, give us one more little preview. Give us just whet the appetite a little bit for where we think we're going to go next week with this. One more time, and then we're going to sign off.
Yeah, this is where we're going. Bio-Photon cellular communication. It's quantum bio-photon cellular communication. And this is a fairly long document. It may take 2 episodes to go through, but we should. It has some great thought exercises in it, and it.
See,
the first time I read this document,
Don't take it down yet. Go ahead.
I was literally infused with energy when I first read this document. It was that impacting to me. It's a very, very, very illustrative document.
So the last paragraph at the bottom of the screen there says, experimental groups around the world are investigating the outlandish but not inconceivable hunch that the boundaries of quantum theory have to do with the complexity of a system or even with life itself. And then China. Yeah, we're definitely going there.